Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Carlson. I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, and so I want to welcome everyone to this webcast. We've had a great turnout for today's session on creating an actionable mobile strategy. It's also great to see so many current clients and prospects on the call, so hello to Russ, Mike, Dan, and Josh. It's nice to have you here. A few things just from a housekeeping perspective. One is you can always ask questions using the QA panel on the webinar function within WebEx. I'll take those forward, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar with Shahab. Also, as always, there's always going to be a recording of this webinar available, and also the slides will be made available after the webinar, probably later tonight or tomorrow morning. Just a few seconds on Propelix. Propelix creates mobile strategies and world-class apps for the enterprise. We are 100% focused on mobile for the enterprise, both customer-facing, but more importantly, we feel on some of the higher value use cases for employees, partners, and distributors, etc. We have a 15-year track record in providing enterprise-level strategy to Fortune 500 clients, helping build strategies around technology use, but more specifically in taking advantage of disruptive technologies. For the last 6 years, we've been working exclusively within mobile, trying to drive valuable use cases to employees and customers and partners of some of our clients. We're based in San Jose with consultants across North America, but many of our engagements include a global reach working with those types of firms. Just a little bit more about us. We primarily work within 3 primary service areas. Our first one is we do a lot of mobile strategy services that are delivered as fast-paced workshop engagements, sometimes as quickly as a single week. And we build a lot of our services and a lot of our Kickstart projects around specific challenges we see repeatedly in discussion with some of our prospects and in working with our clients. And so some of these are listed here up on top. So we do a lot of areas around kind of creating and helping build a mobile app portfolio for our firms. We do a lot of work around scoping and planning. And so after I have a good, strong mobile idea, how does that look like and how we build that going forward? We do a lot of work in IT readiness for mobility and helping IT organizations try to understand what assets do we have in-house and how can we relate those in trying to build out an infrastructure to support mobile. And we do a lot of work in one of our major areas is in terms of performing some innovation through visualization. So we're very much built around prototype creation and trying to take complex enterprise processes and bring them into beautiful, elegant applications that are valuable. We also offer mobile advisory services. So these are really structured as block of hour type engagements, but a lot of our clients use our people and tools and processes in more of an ad hoc mode, really away from structured high momentum workshops. And so we also do a lot of speaking engagements. We assist with vendor evaluations and RFP processes. We do a lot of work in terms of policy and helping organizations with policy, both in terms of definition and governance. A lot of creation in terms of center of excellence and both leading those COEs as well as helping define roles and content. And finally, we tie this all back into delivering managed services, where we focus heavily on great user experience and application simplicity upfront and quality reusable portable code on the back end. Finally, just for folks who haven't been with us before, we perform these webinars monthly. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. You can also view the recordings of any of our previous 15 webinars, as well as download the slides from any of these presentations. So if you go to our homepage at www.propelix.com and click over here on resources and webinar recordings, you'll see a web page where you can really view any of those webinars on demand, as well as download the slides at your leisure. So now I'd like to introduce Shahab Chowdhury. Shahab is a visionary thought leader who has been at the forefront of trying to make sense of various technology shifts in the past 2 decades. He's advised several startups, early-stage companies, and Fortune 500 companies in making the most of these technology shifts. He continues to be a trusted advisor to some of the world's leading brands around the world. And Shahab is a frequent speaker at conferences related to mobile. So Shahab, welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, Eric, and welcome everybody to the webinar. The topic today is especially interesting, not only because in itself there's a lot of content that we'd like to share when we talk about mobile strategy, but I think finally with the maturity that some of the companies have achieved around mobile strategy, there's good data looking out ahead as to what has to still come. But interestingly enough, now we're able to look at some trends and how mobile strategy has evolved within companies over a period of the last 2 years. And so I want to share some of that in terms of some of the trends to frame our conversation here a little bit. One of the trends that we're seeing that we'd like to talk and discuss a lot with the companies that we're working with has to do with what mobile means in terms of innovation and what place does it have as a capability or as an opportunity in terms of innovation. And so as companies think about mobile, clearly the thinking has evolved from initially just the device level, the form factor excitement and the hype around just being always connected and the mobile nature of the device itself to more innovation in the business process, and in some cases companies that look at processes as mobile first, processes that were not previously possible. And so I think that's a big game changer, looking at mobile in new and unique ways compared to what existed in the past. So I want to talk about that trend, and we'll certainly discuss this further as we get into the slides here. The second one has to do with the shift that we're seeing from focusing on just planning and thinking about mobile strategy, envisioning what that could look like, to starting to switch gears and start to execute on those strategies. And so we've seen a pretty significant shift from early stage discussions at the board level, at the leadership level, to those discussions trickling down to planning and roadmap type of discussions at the execution level. And now we're starting to see the initial stages of those strategies starting to get executed on. And in some cases, companies that got out early on are also starting to get into the benefits capture stage to see how the early implementations of those strategies have panned out for them. Important trend, obviously one that we think is going to continue to evolve, and 2013 definitely is a year of planning and execution. 2014 we think is going to be massive innovation around those types of roadmaps. The third trend, which is also I think one that is critical to keep an eye on, is the shift away from implementing strategies that focused only on the outward-facing aspect of mobile strategies, primarily around the customer channel, the consumer channel, where the enterprise use cases were always on the radar. We're starting to see a renewed, or actually a more focus on business to employee, business to business type of use cases, and strategies around those types of use cases are starting to gain more attention than now that companies have gotten their arms around their customer-facing strategies. I think, as you will see, all of these trends point to somewhat higher level maturity around mobile strategies. And I think that's an important fact to take into account as you start to develop your own mobile strategy. A few other things that I want to talk about, just in terms of when we talk about mobile strategy, what aspects does that cover? For a lot of companies, initial stages of mobile strategy were truly around just the technology considerations. It was more around a strategy to get ready from an IT or a support perspective to be able to support mobile use cases. In other cases, it was primarily driven by a business function starting to develop channel strategies and process innovation opportunities, and looking at them and including them in the mobile strategy. Now we're seeing more of a holistic view that all of those elements have to come together to form the enterprise mobile strategy. So this picture talks a little bit about starting with in understanding what are the drivers for mobile strategy, and what type of innovation are you looking for, and what drivers are important to the organization. And they vary by the type of channel, by the type of organization, the size of the company, and the scope of the innovation that you're trying to pursue with your mobile strategy. We'll talk about business drivers in more detail as one of the consideration, and how do you go about including those in your strategy. Along with that, obviously using mobile as an opportunity to innovate, looking at processes that exist in the organization where there may be status quo in some aspects of it, and looking at those to understand what can be done leveraging mobile as a tool or as a capability, understanding the business demand from the various different aspects of the business, understanding regulatory considerations, channel opportunities, and then basing all of that on a very firm foundation based on the underpinnings of the plumbing and the technology that has to support all of these mobile aspirations for any company. That we think is the holistic picture that represents or should represent your mobile strategy. And as we talk about the remainder of the slides, you'll see that there's aspects of this entire picture that get covered as part of the discussion today. A few assumptions that I wanted to go over, which is sort of defining the typical enterprise or the typical company that is going through the mobile strategy. And we think that these are also taking from the companies that we're working with, true for the most part in the universe of mobile innovation today. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that last year was a year of discussion and trying to figure out what mobile would mean in the enterprise. I think it is now fair to assume that the value that mobile can bring to an enterprise is not lost on the stakeholders in the organization. I think people are not looking to be convinced. I think they're convinced. They're now starting to figure out what to do and how to unleash that value. The next assumption that we'd like to talk about is that we all know that we arrived at this place in mobile strategy evolution by way of having built apps as our first foray into the mobile world. And so what we call random acts of mobile, we have all been part of it, and we've no doubt learned from it, and at the same time we've also made some mistakes that we should look back and make sure we are not part of our strategy going forward. So we like to make that assumption. And then the third one that I'd like to talk about is just around the fact that finally now the debate over mobile strategy and what it means to you is over, and I think people are starting to look at how big is trying to size the opportunity and the associated budget with the mobile strategy. So a lot of discussions around how do we start, how big is this thing, does it require a whole department, does it require a mobile center of excellence, does it require a few resources to be allocated, what tools do we acquire? All of those are part of the budget conversation, which is good news because it starts to give momentum to mobile strategy in a true discipline within an organization. So with those assumptions, I'd like to move into some of the approaches that we have used, and I think this lays the groundwork for the rest of the discussion today. The approach that we have typically taken, and we have shared some of the aspects covered in this approach in previous webinars as well. But it's a three-step approach that goes through understanding the drivers for the organization, understanding the market opportunity, and being able to use those to frame where in the organization is there an opportunity for innovation. And the second part to that step is to also understand that not all aspects or areas of your organization are at the same level of readiness to adopt mobile. And so is it a particular segment? Is it maybe a subset of your business? Is it in one vertical maybe within the business? Maybe a few channels in the business may be more ready. So identifying that hotspot to start with as part for your mobile strategy is very important. The overall mobile strategy has to be all-encompassing, but when we talk about an actionable mobile strategy, there has to be some sense of some pieces of the organization will act on that faster than others. And so those are the ones that we'd like to uncover, and we look at that as the innovation hotspot. The second step focuses then on understanding that for that hotspot and the opportunities available in that area, how do you go about understanding the risk profile of the types of use cases you're looking at? What does the app portfolio look like for that part of the business? And how do you make sure that those opportunities that have been identified can be turned into apps or capabilities that can truly deliver the value? Being able to take those ideas and be able to go further beyond just putting them down on paper by actually doing some visualization and ideation exercises around those ideas. And then very importantly, understanding what is the technology maturity of the organization to be able to support those, going back to the holistic model earlier that I shared with you guys. Understanding all that, step 3 focuses on the roadmap and next steps, which is where we start to look at what is the business and IT roadmap, which has a very strong sense of phasing based on your readiness. What comes first, what comes second, and what can be deferred till later are very important considerations in this third step. And creating some recommendations and the action plan. And I guess a big part of today's conversation is really this action plan. Creating strategies that point to a general area of opportunity is great, but the next step, which translates that general area of opportunity into actionable next steps, is, we think, the most critical aspect of mobile strategy development. And so the remainder of the discussion today is really going to focus on, as you develop these early stage strategies, how do you take them to an actionable plan? So I'm going to jump right in and share with you some of the considerations that go into that mobile strategy development. So the very first one that we'd like to talk about is to define the innovation posture. And so what we mean by that is innovation in an organization can be done at various different levels when you think about mobile. It can start off with very simple use cases that have to do with just access to existing data stores. We saw a lot of this happening in early stages of mobile adoption. Mobile strategy and mobile roadmaps had use cases that just allowed you to be able to get to file stores, SharePoint, things along those lines. And that definitely has its place, but we think it's that level of innovation has come and gone. I think it may have been a good first step, but definitely doesn't translate to a whole lot of value these days. The next level innovation is extending the enterprise applications to mobile devices. And so applications that exist today, such as CRM, ERP applications, other homegrown applications that have business processes embedded in them, giving them a mobile front end has been a big part of innovation within the organization as well. Moving on from there, looking at bolting on mobile solutions to current processes without true innovation still results in value, but we still think that that was the early stage thinking around mobile. And I think the last three are the areas where we're starting to get into some fundamental shifts in thinking within organizations as they think about using mobile for innovation. And this has to do with starting to use mobile to extend the interaction and engagement in ways that did not previously exist, or in ways that mobile allows you to be able to do that wasn't possible previously. It creates net new behaviors, it creates net new metrics, and definitely new business opportunities. Likewise, looking at game changer type of mobile use cases, things that allow you to use mobile in a way that you can go back and challenge the upstream process that you're trying to create a mobile use case for, and fundamentally changing how business is done just because mobile allows you to do certain things that you couldn't in the past. Streamlining processes, simplifying processes, eliminating paper, eliminating approval levels are all some examples of that type of a use case. And then in some cases, looking at organizations that are starting to call themselves mobile-first organizations, where there's new processes being thought of, where an application or process does not exist today, and mobile is the first time that process has been created in the organization. So the key here is that as you think about your innovation posture, what we mean by that is to understand that as part of your strategy, how much of which of these use cases will make up your mobile strategy. If it is all made up of access to existing data stores, access to existing systems, perhaps it's not the most innovative strategy. And that may be okay depending on what your business drivers are and what you're trying to accomplish. However, understanding the different levels and understanding what impact they will have is a critical component to any mobile strategy. Hence, it's the first step in starting the process. As part of the innovation hotspot, I think it's also important, as I mentioned earlier, to understand the types of mobile strategies that are available to you span B2C, business to employee to consumer, business to employee, and then business to business, which we think is a big part of mobile strategy for companies. And so understanding how much of which type of use cases would be a part of your portfolio makes up an important consideration as you start your innovation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, identifying where the opportunity exists within the organization across the lines of business, across different verticals, different channels, maybe different geographies, and understanding that business value may vary across those segments. The innovation opportunity may vary across those segments. The suitability for mobile may be at different levels in those different groups. And in some ways, depending on what kind of competitive advantage you're trying to reach or what kind of market share each one of those lines of business has, it may be a different story. And of course, the readiness may vary as well. And it is important to take that into account, especially working with large companies. What we find is that there can be a huge variation. Sometimes these large companies have several acquisitions, mergers that are now lines of business within the company. And so certainly they've come to the same spot through different roads, and now they're at different levels of readiness, and their capabilities vary in terms of how much mobile innovation they can absorb and leverage. So definitely a consideration that has to be accounted for. The second one has to do with, as you're identifying this hotspot, what are some of your business drivers, and being able to understand these and understand that these business drivers will vary with the type of use. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the typical business drivers that we see, and these are just some examples, a consumer channel focused strategy will focus more on things along the lines of brand perception or loyalty or deeper engagement with the customers, or increasing repeat visits, or increasing the size of the ticket in a retail location. Customer satisfaction obviously is a big part of it. If you are thinking about strategies that have to do with providing mobile capabilities to your partners, or how you do business with your partners, or B2B applications, it tends to be more about competitive advantage. It has to do more with what kind of market share can you capture in that business partners on their radar, and looking at satisfaction for that partner and how easy the organization is to work with. And then, of course, sales effectiveness, profitability, and efficiency are all aspects in the partner channel as well. Likewise, when you start to think about drivers for employee-focused strategies, retention, employee satisfaction, effectiveness, and efficiency are typically things that get looked at. And so understanding not all of these drivers are important to you, and aligning them to your overall corporate goals is very important. We start typically by articulating these, understanding that not all of them are the same level. We go through a process to rank these, and we use that as guardrails as we start to think about what applications to build, what features and functions within those applications are the most important ones. This is what forms the basis of our business value analysis in your portfolio of applications and your mobile strategy. Along with that, we'd like to also talk about understanding the business demand. So now that you have a framework based on which areas to innovate in and what business drivers to use as guardrails, being able to understand and fold the business on what are some of the things that you should be thinking about. So as an example, going through an ideation process to understand the different types of demand from the different types of aspects of the business. Typically, when we go through these types of exercises, the use cases or the innovation areas, we are somewhere in the 100 to 200 different ideas that get generated out of these types of kickstarts or workshops that we conduct. Going through that and assessing through this framework that I'm introducing to you around the total value for each one of those different areas, around the readiness for each one of those areas, and the ease of implementation for those areas, helps you generate a heat map that, again, helps you understand where is the biggest opportunity in the type of demand that you're seeing. So let me talk a little bit about what goes into the value score, the readiness score, and the ease of implementation. As you would expect, the value score is based primarily on the alignment to drivers. It is based on a quantifiable value that can be associated with those use cases. And by doing this on a relative scale, you're able to understand the high value areas versus the ones that may sound nice as ideas, but when you really go through an exercise where you're trying to align those to your business drivers, you're able to form some consensus that maybe due to the lack of alignment, they maybe don't offer the value that you may have initially perceived them to deliver. The readiness score, again, is based on several parameters. Some of those have to do with, does the idea have support from leadership? Does the idea have the required data assets available within the organization already so they can be leveraged for mobile use? Is there the opportunity to be able to leverage existing systems or dashboards or plumbing or processes that exist today? Is the culture of the organization such that it will adopt that easily, and there wouldn't have to be a lot of training and assimilation and organizational change management related challenges that the organization will have to overcome? And talking about the third parameter, the ease of implementation, given that we're not just talking about the technical aspects of it, but looking at overall, what would it take to actually implement the idea and turn it into reality? So things along the lines of the technical architecture-related aspects, the infrastructure-related investments, the organizational-related investments and costs are all accounted for in there. And so as you'll see, we recommend that that level of rigor has to go into this process. And that way it's a very defensible position of understanding based on not only have you captured all the business demand, but you've also been able to rank that in a framework that everybody agrees to. And this tends to serve as a living document, forms the basis of your strategy, and is something that can easily be used for communication across the different lines of business in understanding the business demand. Moving on to the next piece from here, starts to shift gears, now having understood the demand, understanding the risk components of your portfolio. So there's a few things to keep in mind here. Not all use cases are created equal when it comes to the amount of risk that they can expose you to. So that analysis becomes very critical to do at a very early stage before you start getting excited about the type of value that these use cases can offer in certain areas. And that assessment has to be done, again, using a good understanding of the type of data that is being accessed with these types of use cases. So is it customer data? Is it data related to financials? Is it data related to individuals or companies that are your customers? Is it data that's readily available and accessible openly? Those are all different ends of the spectrum when it comes to the type of data being accessed. And along with that, it's also very important to understand the risk of breach associated with each type of asset. And based on that, if you can generate a score, that can be very helpful in knowing that not all high-value use cases are necessarily those that come with a high-risk score associated with them as well. And so the high-value, high-risk scores are typically what we categorize as trusted use cases. They may be high value because they give you visibility to very critical information, but like by the same token, they're also very high risk because that data can, if it's breached, can result in comparative disadvantage, and can. The other category then is, which is where we really find a lot of use cases associated with mobile, are the high value and the lower risk use cases. That profile is ideal for mobile. It is something that is typically a good starting point for any mobile strategy. And this is part of why it's so important to do this exercise early on as part of your mobile strategy to identify where is that sweet spot of semi-trusted use cases. And perhaps your early stages of mobile strategy execution could start in that area. And the third category we like to talk about is the business value, which is somewhat questionable, even though the risk is low. And in those cases, perhaps maybe it could also be early starting point for your implementation of your mobile strategy, realizing that the value delivered by those use cases is sometimes not very high. The next area that we'd like to talk about is around the readiness for mobile. And I alluded to this earlier, that as part of your mobile strategy, an important consideration is to make sure that you understand what is the baseline of the existing infrastructure, the existing capabilities of the organization, and the best way to find out where you're starting from is to actually do a quantifiable assessment of that baseline. So we recommend using a maturity model that allows you to be able to quantify the starting point and understand, to get to a basic level of mobile readiness, where in the organization do you have gaps that you have to be backfilled before you can proceed. And so thinking about areas such as, do you have a mobile strategy? Do you have the drivers of the mobile strategy? What's your philosophy around mobile innovation? Typically, we find companies are starting with very early stage maturity. So we'll find typically a stage 1 or stage 2 maturity as it relates to mobile strategy. Enterprise information management, everything that has to do with what are the practices in the organization related to data cleansing, data quality, data storage, data availability, access to data through enterprise-grade tools, your web services capabilities, your integration capabilities, all are included in this analysis. And here, more and more so, we see that there's at least some basic level of maturity already exists in the organization, unless it's organizations that have a lot of legacy data and legacy systems where they tend to have a lot of point-to-point interfaces and not as much of a enterprise service bus type of an architecture where services are available readily to be able to connect to that data. Since a lot of mobile applications start with integration with existing systems for data acquisition, important to include this as part of your assessment. IT delivery and support, again, we're looking at this from a mobile lens, and so SDLC, support, application, admin, and maintenance processes exist in most organizations today. But when you try to use the existing processes for mobile application development, for mobile deployment, for mobile application support, sometimes the readiness ends up ranking quite a bit lower than where organizations may think they are. And I think as we understand mobile-related nuances more and more, I think it's becoming pretty evident that some of the tools and technologies and processes that exist today do not come along well when it comes to the readiness of to support mobile. Likewise, as you go down this list, some of the other ones I would like to talk about are the application development platform. We find that a lot of organizations, in not understanding what's needed in mobile, find that they rank and rate their maturity a lot higher than it really is. Mobile requires a different set of tools and techniques and technologies to be able to implement, be it cross-platform development, be it native or hybrid application development. The whole discipline around how do you capture analytics and good data around your applications, how do you capture feedback within the applications, how do you test the applications before they're rolled out, and how do you get some good analytics once the applications are rolled out to the user base. So all those areas are areas that have to be looked at, and we tend to include those in these assessments related to the IT baseline. And so here's an example of that, which is looking at the 5-stage maturity model. Here's a report card that is generated out of that. And so along with the business demand, this is an important component of your IT strategy or your mobile strategy development. I'd like to move on to the next one, which has to do with the as you build a plan from building your mobile strategy and turning it into actionable tactics, it has to be something that can be measured at mobile pace. And so a lot of the ways that things have been done in the past, we find results in very large, long-term plans, but the first phase may itself be 6 to 8 months out. And we tend to see success more in cases where it's more iterative, it's more manageable for companies as they're starting to go from early stage of maturity to the next stages. And what we find there is tactics that are contained, tactics that are measurable, that you can have quick success around. And so here's an example of a roadmap that takes the mobile strategy and turns it into an actionable plan. It has embedded in it the concept of what are some of the required elements that have to be a part of your strategy from the get-go. These are typically the foundational tactics. Perhaps some tactics that follow after that in a short-term phase, and then some that can be deferred into mid to long-term phases as well. And there's also this idea that there are some quick wins that may be tactics that can piggyback off of existing or ongoing efforts within the organization. So identifying that mobile doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting itself. If there's work or projects or initiatives that are going on in the various different areas in the organization already, how can those be expanded to include some of the things that mobile may also have a requirement for? So if nothing else, at least those parts of the organization are able to gain some visibility to what the demands are from the mobile side as well. And the last one I'd like to spend some time on, which we're starting to see a lot of interest in, is the establishment of a mobile center of excellence to provide guidance around your mobile strategy. And this actually, interestingly enough, gets talked about a lot as something that companies have done in the past, where centers of excellence are not a new concept. It's also something that companies have talked about a lot as part of their mobile strategy, but when it comes to the actionable part of the mobile strategy, they're struggling to figure out what the center of excellence should look like. And so I want to share a few thoughts on what is a good way to think about this mobile center of excellence, and what is the scope, and what does it cover, and how do you launch it. Those are all aspects that form really the basis of how do you move forward with the actionable aspect of your strategy. So first of all, it's important to define the coverage. We tend to see two different flavors of a mobility-related center of excellence. One focused more on apps, which tends to be a mobile app COE is a better label for that, versus a mobile center of excellence, which beyond the applications also takes into account considerations like MDM or BYOD or device-related strategies or your telecom expense management type of considerations. I would say there's now more so than ever before, we're starting to see more and more interest in the mobile app center of excellence. And the reasons for that are that some of the infrastructure-related challenges in a lot of organizations have been accounted for. Aspects like MDM, BYOD are things that I think people and companies were focused on last year. And I think with resolution around those, the selected technologies are in pilot stages or beyond. And so we're starting to see a lot more focus on what types of apps do we build, how do we build them, how do we support them, what does this new discipline mean for the organization, what kind of skills and tools should we acquire, and how do we go about launching that. So I want to spend a few minutes on that. There's various different models available. We find that some centers of excellence are more repository type of centers of excellence, where at least to get the mobile initiatives going, companies have created content, everything from quick start guides, boot camps for product managers who are involved in the execution of the mobile strategy, just trying to get some convergence on how mobile efforts are progressing in the organization. And we feel that the repository model definitely has a place in the enterprise mobile app COE. The next step up, though, is the coach model, which we think is even more effective in large companies. This is where, in addition to the repository model, there's some coaching and advisory capabilities that exist within the Center of Excellence. This is where, as new initiatives start, at least there's some level of convergence as to how do you go about turning something into a mobile initiative. What are some of the prerequisites? How do you get some input from an advisor on sizing the initiative for budgeting purposes, and then going forward from an execution perspective as well. And then a third model that we see, again, centers of excellence not being a new concept, is the manager model, which is really more focused on governance and compliance type of activities. And we find that that model doesn't work very well for mobile. However, there are some tasks which are critical in any organization: compliance and info security, risks-related issues, which a manager model can be very effective at, as long as it's a smaller piece of the pie that it's trying to manage. So putting these together, a lot of the Center of Excellence that we have been involved in helping create and launch have had a combination of all three of those as part of the mix. And I think the challenge as part of the mobile strategy and how do you make that into an actionable plan has to do with your Center of Excellence has to leverage these three models, but where do you apply what type of model is definitely part of the puzzle that you have to deal with. And so we have tools that we use, again, tying it back to the value and the readiness of each organization. We're able to provide a roadmap that goes through if there's 50 different things that are in the scope of the Center of Excellence, which model is the best suited for each one of those different aspects. Now, as you can imagine, this varies a lot from organization to organization. Again, to the right, you'll see the value and readiness are a big component of it, and there's some other factors we rank this on as well. And being able to take this, there's no one-size-fits-all. Your maturity as an organization plays into this, the size of the organization plays into this, and also the culture has a big piece and a big consideration in here as well. So looking at that, we recommend that this is something that you do early on as part of your Center of Excellence, whether you call it a Center of Excellence or not. Any mobile strategy will have a team that will be responsible for executing it, and it has to have some understanding of which model are they going to use to engage and to define the rules of engagement with the rest of the organization. So from a COE perspective, this being an important consideration, we think as far as actionable mobile strategies go, this is a very important consideration for it. So those are some of the considerations, and we'll come back to some of these, I'm sure, as part of question and answers. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Eric to maybe take some questions for you and to also maybe share some additional background on the PropelX Kickstarts.
Sure. Thanks, Shahab, and thanks for that great content. Just from a Kickstarter perspective, I mentioned some of those at the beginning of the webinar. A few of those are listed here. I think the ones that some of Shahab's comments and approach lead to are very much present in our mobile app roadmap and Center of Excellence type of creation. For the attendees on this call, we're doing a small special offer to have a free 1-hour advisory call with one of either Shahab or I or other partners to talk a little bit more about some of these challenges within your organization, and if there's ways that we've seen or things that we can do to be able to assist with that or put you in touch with maybe one of our clients or prospects who is going through a similar type of structure. We do have a few questions, Shahab. The first one is from Mike. He says, you mentioned budget. How do companies budget for mobile? Is it more project by project? For us, it's difficult to understand the ROI. What are your thoughts, and what are other companies doing?
So that's a great question. Coming up towards the end of the year, a lot of companies are dealing with it right now, and we get that question a lot. There's two aspects to your budgeting and planning exercise. One is things that you would definitely want to invest in across your portfolio and across your strategy. And so things like your mobile application development platform or your infrastructure in the cloud that you're going to use for mobile application development. Things along the lines of app stores and mobile device management platforms. These are all things that are a shared asset, and hence the investment should be something that is made at a centralized level. We feel that application level budgeting comes into play as you start to get a good handle, as I mentioned earlier, as part of your strategy on your mobile app portfolio. Having some guidelines in the Mobile Center of Excellence that is able to help you size these applications and understand how many of these can you really truly take on. I think those are the two components that go into a budgeting exercise. And there's a few other things to keep in mind here as well. One of the things that gets lost in the budgeting exercise today very often is mobile is not a one and done. Applications are built and you have a phase that you account for. There's a life of a mobile application beyond the day that you first launch it. And oftentimes that cost is not accounted for, and important in your considerations for budgeting to take into account the fact that the application will have to be updated a lot more frequently than perhaps some of the enterprise applications that we're used to. It's also important to remember that the support costs and not having those capabilities in the organization today has to be something that has to be accounted for. And likewise, the skill sets are things that don't exist today. So you cannot rely on your existing budgeting tools and processes to be able to use for the budgeting exercise.
Great, thank you. Mark asks, how long does it typically take to complete an actionable strategy, and what is the cost range?
It's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, trying to use the traditional ways of strategy development does not work for mobile. Just like we talk about, mobile has to be done at mobile speed. Mobile strategies have to be done at mobile speed as well. Typical timelines that we have seen and that we recommend and that we do these kickstarts that do exactly that are a 3 to 4 week exercise. And these are with very, very large domains where the participation from the business side is perhaps sometimes global. But like I said earlier, you're really looking for that innovation hotspot. So you try to limit that to some extent, but the early stage ideation can be something that you can expand quite a bit. Focusing the first couple of weeks on ideation, understanding of the demand, focusing in the middle part of that on the readiness of the organization, and focusing towards the tail end of that strategy kickstart on pulling them together into an actionable plan, just like we talked through the 6 or 7 steps that I discussed today. So I would say 3 to 4 weeks is the average that you should think about for strategy development.
Thanks, Shahab. A couple other questions. Sandeep asked, third-party versus custom applications. Should we start with one or the other? And what are other companies doing in regards to this? Third-party meaning probably things that are available from some of the ERP or CRM vendors, things like that.
Yeah, the app portfolio tends to be made up of all of the above. I think there's definitely going to be a need for rolling out apps that are available in the publicly available app stores, perhaps purchased maybe through a volume purchase program or through a corporate purchase program, rolled out with the right level of security and testing being performed around them. That should definitely be part of the initial stages of your mobile portfolio. We also do think that only exercises a portion of your mobile strategy and will not necessarily give you all of what you're looking for, and may not also give you the value that that is potentially available in some of the use cases that have been generated by the business. And so, looking at some use cases that have high value and have somewhat a higher level of readiness in the organization to be able to rally around them, and the cost is not necessarily the highest, is perhaps maybe should be a part of the initial phases of your mobile strategy rollout. I would though caution that sometimes high value applications that are pretty complicated and complex, that are beyond the scope of what the organization can handle right away, maybe ones to be deferred. But I would say starting with 2 or 3 different initiatives as part of mobile strategy, and these don't have to be apps only, these can be some other aspects of your mobile strategy that can be rolled out in the early stages. I think that's important just to make sure all aspects of your organization, from mobile application development to support of applications to just the infrastructure, the network, the security practices, the policies, they all get exercised. A good combination like that is a good chunk to go after.
Great. Tim asked, risk analysis was mentioned. In lines with that, what are companies doing with BYOD? We didn't really talk about kind of personal devices too much in here. Executives want it, our security and IT is concerned. What's the high-level approach, and what are the organizations doing in terms of personal devices?
Yeah, we actually didn't talk about it, only for the reason that we feel that for the most part, companies have overcome some of the challenges, and so certainly it's been not easy to be able to form a point of view and to get around some of these issues that traditionally organizations had not dealt with. And so as far as the state of MDM today, there's really three buckets. It is obviously the corporate-owned devices that are being managed through an MDM solution, or applications being delivered through a mobile app management platform, and then the BYOD, which has many different gradients of use. And so we recommend using that risk analysis framework of trusted, untrusted, and semi-trusted. If you pick the right use cases and the risk is manageable, you're able to implement policies around that where you can get comfortable with the fact that it's not data that is being exposed that exposes you to a very high level of risk, yet it can get you to a fairly high level of value pretty quickly. As part of that rollout, obviously, having a good MDM solution in place is important. Having some containerization around your applications is very important, and having well thought through policies that are not too open, and at the same time they don't prevent the use case from being exercised end to end is very important as well. And so those aspects go into a good BYOD sort of strategy. And there's other aspects related to the legal and HR considerations. You have to take that into account as well. And then the last piece I would say is just think through the compensation model around, is it a stipend? Is it something that you are able to pool the minutes and allow people to expense against that? But again, I would say those are all aspects of your BYOD strategy that have good answers to, for the most part, that can be tailored to your organization.
Great, thank you. We have time just for a couple more. Karen asked, we're having troubles in just getting started. How do other companies start, and what really is the first step?
Yeah, great slide to be talking about that kind of a question. These kickstarts, as you see, are tailored exactly for that. And getting away from the kickstarts themselves, I think if you think about some of the considerations, just making sure, understanding that your mobile strategy has to have a driver. It has to be done for the right reasons. And so if you feel like there is loss of competitive advantage, what can mobile do for you? If you feel like there's an opportunity to leapfrog the competition in certain areas, that's an opportunity for you. And I think using those types of drivers, we think are excellent catalysts for getting people together. The other key thing, though, is that it has to be quick. It has to be something that can show what mobile can truly mean. And one of the things I would offer up there would be visualization of some use cases in something that's fairly realistic in very rapid time frames. I know I said a few things that are sometimes very hard to pull together, but if you're able to identify a few use cases that perhaps may have a lot of value associated with them, and you're able to visualize them in a quick 1 to 2 week exercise and pull them into a prototype that has good business fundamentals that you're showcasing in that application, beyond just the coolness factor of mobile, I think those are a great way to get the ball rolling. And we use that very effectively with very, very large companies that have been spinning their wheels for a long time, and we've had great success with that. So I would recommend trying something like that.
Great, and time for one more. And it's a little bit of a doozy, but Brian asks, we're not very successful in center of excellence creation in other areas. What else would you recommend if a COE hasn't worked before? Will it work for mobile, and how do you drive that consistency?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually the first thing I would do is to not call it a center of excellence if it hasn't worked before. We've done things along the lines of just as I was responding to the previous question, creating something that is maybe a visualization lab. Maybe it is an innovation team around mobile, and starting off small. And the idea of a center of excellence is not to necessarily have a huge headcount have huge overhead, have all of the team sit together and work on this mobile problem, but more of a very lean coordination body that is able to federate the skill sets and resources from other areas. And at the same time, there are skill sets that don't exist in the organization, and those can perhaps reside within the Center of Excellence. So I would say, if you think about the stages of launching a Center of Excellence, the initial part of it is to really prototype the idea on the backs of maybe the first few mobile initiatives. And so the applications that you're building, if there's 2 or 3 different initiatives going on, start off small and try to gain some convergence across those 2 or 3 initiatives, and understand that you're not going to be able to control and manage all aspects of those initiatives, but the ones that are really critical can perhaps form the basis of some commonality in thinking and perhaps some economies of scale. And once you're able to do that, I think people tend to buy into the idea a little bit easier than if you try to create this body that they're not quite convinced of the value that's going to impart. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that with mobile, there are some nuances that as you take people through that process, the aha happens that, wow, this is a lot more complex than we thought, and perhaps maybe some people who are 24/7 thinking about these kinds of things, staying on top of the trends and the technologies and where mobile is headed, maybe is worthwhile. But again, I would caution, keep that small, keep it very nimble, especially in the early stages of the launch of the COE.
Great. Shahab, thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much. I appreciate everybody joining today. Great questions as well, so enjoyed having the conversation around this.
Yep, and it's time for us to get back to our client engagements. And like I said before at the beginning of this webinar, we do these every month. Please sign up at propellix.com. You can see our other recordings available at propellix.com/resources, and take advantage of the special offer. We have plenty of time to be able to talk about some of these types of engagements, and also we can bring in a little bit more client-specific information that we don't like to do on webinars, but can tell you a little bit more about what some of our clients are doing in some of these types of areas, and a little bit more real-world examples in some of these things as well. And for that, thank you, Shahab. Thank you for everyone for attending, and we will see you in November. Thank you.